Hey everybody, welcome back. It is a scorcher today. 103 degrees today. I got in my truck and the thermometer in my truck at the time showed 133. Obviously it wasn't 133, but that's how hot it was in the truck. And I think it's almost 6 p.m. now and it's still 101 degrees. This back corner of my yard seems a little cooler. I've got vegetation and it just seems to kind of help a little bit. Anyway, tack för sist, välkommen tillbaka. Thank you for being here. I appreciate it if you subscribe, comment, share, all of that. I really appreciate it. So a few months ago, I was just going back and I was kind of rewatching a video that was the video that has performed the best for me on YouTube. And it had a lot of cool comments. It had several negative ones too. People said I didn't go into enough detail on the story. That's not why I'm doing this video. As I was watching it, I was reminded of something that I said in that video that I was going to do a video about, and I just spaced it until I went back and watched that. This is something that happened on my Mormon mission in 1984. Excuse me. I actually don't know if I'm still a Norwegian citizen. They had threatened to take it from me if I didn't. Well, I don't want to give away the story. So I'm not sure if I'm a Norwegian citizen right now, but I was for sure then. And back then when you lived in Norway, so I started my Mormon mission in February of 1983. Got to Norway in April of 1983, stayed there till the end of August of 84. Just to give you the timeline. They switched the Mormon missions to just a year and a half there for a little while, and that was the main reason I went. I wasn't going to go 2 years. It just seemed forever. I wanted to make my parents happy. I wanted them to be proud of me, but 2 years just seemed like something I couldn't do. So when they switched it, I decided to do it. And when I got my calling and it was to Norway, I remember my mom just screaming. She was so excited. I was pretty excited too. You know, I love the States. I love living here. I'm proud of my country. But I wanted to go somewhere different. I didn't want to like go to, you know, South Dakota or Virginia or California or anywhere. I wanted to go foreign. So when I heard Norway, I was like, I get to go back to my home country. At that point, I hadn't been there in 7 years. And I guess it was about 6.5 years. But I was really excited. And when you get to Norway, back then, I don't know how it works now, anytime you move to a new town, excuse me, itchy nose, you had to go register in the town. You know, I live here, blah, blah, blah. And I lived in several towns before, I guess, it kind of caught up with me. And I'll tell you what that means. So I had been in Norway for probably about a year and had lived in several towns at that point, probably 3 or 4, maybe even 5 towns at that point. And I remember I got this letter at my apartment. I believe I was living, geez, where was I living? I don't even remember. I think it was up in North Norway in Kristiansund. I think that's where I was. That's not really pertinent to the story, but I got a letter, and it looked like an official letter from the Norwegian military. And sure enough, I opened it up, and that's exactly what it was. In Norway, everybody has to serve in the military, men and women. I think it's still like that. There's a chance it's changed, but I'm pretty sure it's still like that. And it varied from a year to a year and a half, depending on where you served, what part of the military you were serving in. Well, I got my notice. You're a Norwegian citizen, you're living in Norway, I called it being drafted into the military. You're gonna serve. And at this point I had been, you know, on a mission for well over a year. I was already starting to look forward to going home, getting a little antsy. You know, when you're 20 years old, time is not the same as when you're 62 years old. Trust me, if you're 20 years old and watching this video, you'll find out someday. So the fact that I had to serve another year or year and a half after I was done my year and a half, that seemed like forever to me. But being in Norway, I had to go through all the steps. So I had to go do physicals and all kinds of blood tests, and I guess make sure that I was fit to serve in the military, which I was. And they hadn't told me at this point where I was going to serve, when I was going to serve. So like I said, I left Norway. I finished my Mormon mission, I want to say on like the 30th of August 1984. I believe I got home on the 31st. And hold, do you need something, Braden?
No, I was just doing the heat.
Okay. We're gonna do a video in a little while.
Okay.
I'm gonna do a video with my son too. This will be a really interesting one. It's about something I've talked about before. Anyway, back to the video. So they hadn't told me where I was gonna serve, how long I was gonna serve, none of that. So it happened, if you're LDS or even if you're aware of the Mormon Church, you probably know who Thomas S. Monson was. So the Mormon Church has a first presidency, you got the prophet, and then, is it 2 or 3 counselors? I don't even remember anymore. I think it's 2, it might be 3 counselors. I don't remember. But then you have the 12 apostles and the first presidency, the president. And Thomas Monson got made an apostle of the Mormon Church in 1963 at the age of 36. He eventually moved to the first presidency in 1985 when Ezra Taft Benson was the prophet of the Mormon Church. And then eventually he became the prophet / president of the Mormon Church until his death in 2018. I believe he was 90 years old when he passed away. Anyway, I reached out to my mission president about what was happening. And, you know, I was pretty paranoid. I was like, you know, I love Norway. Part of me wants to serve, but I've already been gone from home. By the time I'm done, it's going to be already a year and a half, and then they want me to stay another year and a half. In hindsight, I really wish I would have done it. I really do. Yeah, it's one of my regrets. I try to live my life without regrets. In fact, I say all the time, no. You ever seen the movie We're the Millers? No regrets. I try not to live with regrets, but that is something I wish I would have done differently. Anyway, I reached out to my mission president, and from time to time they have what's called zone conferences. And I believe, actually, I might have been in Stavanger when this all happened, because I think I was a zone leader, and we had zone conference in Stavanger. Thomas Monson happened to be visiting as an apostle. This was right before he was elevated to the first presidency in 1984. The next year he went to the first presidency. So he was very high up in the church when he came. And I had a couple of run-ins with other high up members of the Mormon Church, and I was not impressed. As far as I was concerned, not good people. I've talked about it before. I'm not going to talk about it here. So I went in with a little trepidation when I heard that Thomas Monson wanted to talk to me. And when I heard he wanted to talk to me, I was like, well, it'll be with the mission president and the assistants to the mission president and all that. No, I got there to the mission president's, I don't know if it was his hotel or he had an office on the road, whatever it was. And they said, Elder Monson is waiting for you. And so I kind of knocked, you know. I guess I was 20 years old at this time. And I opened the door, and here's Thomas Monson sitting there. And if you don't know, Thomas Monson is a big man. He's a big, intimidating man. I always enjoyed him when he would give talks. It was one of the few people I enjoyed talking to because he used lots of anecdotes and stories, and he was entertaining, and he seemed like a happy dude. But I didn't know if that was a facade or if that was him. Turned out, maybe the nicest person I've ever met in my life. He was such a sweetheart. He was so kind. He could tell I was nervous, and he put me at ease right away. We just sat and chit-chatted for a little while. I was blown away because for me, being on a Mormon mission at that time, it was like meeting a giant celebrity. It was a big deal. And the fact that he was so gentle and kind and took my feelings into account meant a lot to me. And we just sat and talked a little bit. He asked where he knew I was from Norway, but he asked where my home was then. And I said, Tabor, Alberta, Canada. And I'll never forget it. He says, oh, I know Tabor, Alberta very well. He says, did you know, this will be fun for those of you that watch. I know some of you watch that grew up in Tabor. The Tabor, Alberta stake was the highest attended stake in the world, percentage-wise. I believe at that time, he said it was like in the mid to high 70s, which is very high. Nowadays, the average church attendance across everywhere is somewhere, depending on what stat you want to believe, somewhere between 25 and 40%. But even back then, 75, 80% was very high. So I was quite proud of that. I was like, that's really cool. He knows my town, he knows my stake, he knows my people. And just chit-chatted for a while. Super nice dude, just pleasant as could be. Just, like I said, kind, just a nice guy. And, it's finally time to get down to business. He didn't act rushed, by the way. He didn't act like I was a hassle that he had to deal with. None of that. He sits back and he's looking at the paper. This big man. I don't know how tall Thomas Monson was. I'm guessing he was like 6'4", 250 pounds. He was a big man. I'll have to look. I should have looked that up. But he sits back and he's looking at this paper. He says, so, we sent you to Stavanger, Norway, huh? And you got to remember, when you grow up in the Mormon church, when you get your mission calling, it's supposed to be coming from God. It's supposed to be inspiration to the prophet of where they're supposed to send you. So I was supposedly sent there by divine inspiration. So remember that when I tell what Thomas Monson said. And he leans back and he says, well, we screwed up there, didn't we? And he just kind of looked at me, like, seriously. And I was like panicked. I'm like, holy crap, I wasn't even supposed to come here. And then he just started laughing, just laughing, and like the look on your face. And when I finally realized it was a joke, I started laughing with him. And he's like, no, this is all going to work out, Elder Larson. No worries at all. This is all going to work out. And we sat there for a while and kind of brainstormed. He asked my thoughts. He didn't just tell me what was going to happen. The more I think about it, I think it was in Stavanger, because I think it was getting relatively near to the end of my mission. And he asked if I knew when I was supposed to report. And I said, they haven't told me yet. And he says, well, I tell you what I think we should probably do is in the next few weeks, we should transfer you to Sweden to finish out your mission. Which I was kind of excited to go see Sweden, but I was also bummed because Stavanger is my hometown. I knew people there. I had family there. I wanted to finish out my mission there. I really liked the guy I was serving with at the time, my companion, who was a Norwegian. Tomatla was his name. I won't say his last name. If he happens to watch this, dude, you were the best. Just a super nice guy. So I really didn't want to leave, but I didn't want to go into the military either. As a 20-year-old, like I said, I wish I would have, but things happen the way they happen. Just a couple of weeks after that, we found out that I was supposed to report, I believe on August 31st, 1984 in Harstad, which is up north, quite far up north. Kind of a remote, smaller town. It's a military town. I have cousins that live really close to that base. And so I reached out to the mission president and said, look, and I hadn't got my release papers yet, so I wasn't sure when I knew I was going home probably at the end of August, because I started like February 24th, 1983, so 18 months would have been August 24th. I figured I was probably going to go home before the end of August, but it could have stretched into early September. So I told my mission president they want me to report August 31st. And so when I got my release papers, it was the day before that. And so I flew out of Norway on the 30th of August, 1984. I think I flew from Stavanger to Heathrow Airport in London and then home. And it wasn't real long after that that I got a phone call at my parents' house in Canada. I stayed at my parents' house for well, it was the end of August, so I went back to college in January of '85. So from August, 4 months, I guess I stayed at home. And it was probably in September, mid-September, I'm guessing, I got a phone call from the Norwegian military. Some pretty high-ranking guy, I don't remember his name or his rank. I just remember thinking, oh, this is an important dude. And first he started speaking Norwegian. No, he spoke English first. I don't know why. And I spoke Norwegian back to him. At that time, I was completely fluent. You would never know I wasn't just living in Norway my whole life at that point. And so we spoke in Norwegian, and he says, you were supposed to report 2 weeks ago or whatever it was. And I said, I'm really sorry, but I live in Canada now. And he says, well, regardless, you're a Norwegian citizen. You need to come back and report here. And some of you might look down on me for this and criticize me. Fair enough. You got to remember, I was 20 years old. I'd been away from home for a year and a half already. I was so excited to get my life going. You know, even though the mission was not my favorite thing that I ever did, I did have a lot of cool experiences, and I learned a lot from it, and I appreciated it. I was ready to go home. I was ready to go back to school and figure out my life and just get things going. So you got to look at it from a perspective of a fairly young person trying to get their life going. You know, I left home at 17 to go to college, so I'd been gone a fair bit at that point, and I was used to being off on my own. But I wanted to be on my own, not have some companion clinging to me everywhere I went. I wanted to be by myself. Being in the military would have just been another version of that. You're always with somebody. And I politely told him, I says, I'm really sorry, but I'm not coming. And he said something to the effect, I wish I would have written this down at the time. I'll have to go back and look at my diary. I might have written this down. He said something to the effect of, well, we expect you to be here. You have like a week or 2 more weeks or something like that before you're considered. They don't call it AWOL, but something kind of like that. And he says, and we can take your Norwegian citizenship away if you don't do this. He didn't say they would. He said they could. That's why I don't know if they ever did. I reached out to the Norwegian ambassador in San Francisco a few years ago to see about if they took it, and if they did, could I get it back? Now I know I can get it back if I have lost it, and I want to do that. I would like my kids, if they want, to have the experience to be a Norwegian citizen as well. Norway didn't allow dual citizenship back then. They do now. So I respectfully said, you know, I'm sorry, sir. You got to do what you got to do. I got to do what I got to do. I've been gone for a year and a half. I explained that I had been on a Mormon mission there, and that I'd already been gone a long time, and I was ready to start my life. So that's one of those things, you know, you look back and you think, what would have changed? There's a really good chance if I'd have gone into the military like I was supposed to, that I would have ended up maybe staying in Norway, marrying a Norwegian girl, and living in Norway for the rest of my life. You know, the road not taken, the fork not taken. I have no idea. I'm pretty happy with how my life has turned out. You know, I went through a marriage that failed, and it was kind of a rough marriage. Not in any kind of mean, abusive way. We just weren't suited for each other. We did have lots of fun moments together, my ex-wife and I. And we had a beautiful daughter who now has 4 beautiful daughters of her own and a really cool husband. I have no regrets. And now I've been married to my wife for almost 30 years. And other than a glitch here and there, we're pretty happy. I'm pretty content with my life. I'm getting close to being done my major part of my working life. I'll keep doing something, little side projects. I'm not a guy that can sit around. But I don't want to look back and think, what would have happened? I know almost for certain I wouldn't have what I have now. I wouldn't have the kids I have now. I wouldn't have Kate, my wife, my kids, Sherston, Braden, Hannah, Cooper. I would not have them. And I'm glad I do. So yeah, it's kind of a crazy story. It was a crazy couple of months there when we were trying to figure out. I guess it was a few weeks trying to figure out what are we gonna do. What are we gonna do about this? Because this is nuts. But that's the choice I made. They made whatever choice they made. I actually never heard from them. I never got any letters saying your citizenship has been taken away. Nothing. I've been back to Norway a couple times since then. I'm going back again. I've never heard a word about it. So I guess there was no kind of major repercussion to me from that choice. So I don't know if you've ever had any kind of experience like that. It's pretty unique. If you're in Norway and you served in the military, I'd love to hear your stories about it. And, what would I have experienced if I had done that? I have lots of cousins in Norway, and all of them have done it. But I don't think I've ever talked to any of them about it. And that's kind of weird now that I think about it. I might have to do that. I have a cousin who now lives in Houston. She moved to the States, I want to say maybe 10 years ago. I think she's in her early to mid 50s. And so she speaks English perfectly. I may have to see if she's up for an interview, and that might be a cool interview. My son came out a little while ago, my oldest son. He's the one I adopted from my wife's first marriage. And I'm going to do an interview with him. Little teaser here. And if I can figure out how to do it, I'm not good at editing. You see my videos, there's nothing special here. But once I get that video done, I'm gonna see if I can add a link somewhere here to this video. And the video I'm gonna do, I'll tease it a little bit here. I did a video several weeks ago talking about raising non-LDS kids in an LDS community and how difficult it can be. And I heard from a ton of you saying we had the same experience, and it's, we love living in Utah, but that part was really tough. I did have a couple of people say that doesn't happen. You're delusional if you think that, but you get to believe whatever you want, but it absolutely happens. I'm going to interview my son, who's now 31, and he's like, are you sure you want to do that? I don't have a ton of good to say about that. I said, I want you to be honest, but respectful, because I still have a great deal of respect for the Mormon church. But I want you to be honest, because I'm hoping maybe it'll help people out there. I'm not doing it for shock value or to piss anybody off, nothing like that. To diss you, that's not why I'm doing this. I want it to be better, more well known that this happens a lot. And a lot of kids deal with this in Utah. And it's really hard for them. And my kids were lucky enough that they had some friends. They had struggles. It's not the same. And so I'm going to interview him. I think I'm going to do that here in a little bit. I don't know if I'll put both videos out today, but I will try to put a link somewhere in this video to that video. So I'm going to end this one here. Hope you enjoyed that. Look forward to your comments. I just noticed my t-shirt. I hope I didn't offend anybody with my t-shirt. This was my favorite poster growing up. I had such a crush on Farrah Fawcett, and so did every other freaking guy in North America, probably the world. She was a sweetheart. It was kind of sad when she died, because Michael Jackson died on the same day, and she was so overshadowed. I always felt bad for her not really getting her due. But yeah, I was a big Charlie's Angels fan, Farrah Fawcett fan. That's why I have the t-shirt. It's not shock value. That's not me. But I hope you enjoyed the video. Thanks. Tack för den gång. Men snackas igen snart. Thank you so much for watching. Hope you have a beautiful day. Peace. Love.